If you feel put off by this, and I do, I'm not offended, but I find it harder and harder to watch. It's because it's not designed for you to watch. This entire performance was a performance designed for the writer's room at Trevor Noah, or maybe an audition for Jimmy Kimmel. We are going to talk about the White House press, the Correspondents' Dinner. Here's my question of the day. Genuine question. We've talked about the death of comedy, but now we've reached a new level, and we'll try and substantiate that with this segment. Take today's top comics. So people of, I guess, regardless of politics, should be the most fun people on the planet. Would you feel comfortable even attending a dinner party, an after party with them? I mean, I really feel like we've reached a point where if you were to invite me or say I have to go to a barbecue with all of the late night comedy writers, I'd rather stay home for fear of offending someone and being sent to HR. Like, think of a room full of The Daily Show writers or Seth Meyers writers. Yeah. Is that a room where you think you could make a joke, or a room where you think you have to walk on eggshells because someone might be offended?
First people to Snapchat you and ruin your career.
Yes,
you to the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is just bizarre to me because comedy used to be this final frontier of freedom of speech. So I want to make it really clear that everyone has the right to make any jokes that they want to make. Nothing is off limits on comedy, except as a general kind of rule is the helpless. That's how people usually see it. People don't tend to laugh if you make fun of the helpless. But White House Press Correspondents' Dinner, The Daily Show's Michelle Wolf obviously caused quite a stir. People were upset. Here are the jokes for those who haven't seen it that upset those people on the right. Let's watch this.
We are graced with Sarah's presence tonight. I have to say, I'm a little starstruck. I love you as Aunt Lydia on The Handmaid's Tale. Mike Pence, if you haven't seen it, you would love it.
Okay.
And I'm never really sure what to call Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You know, is it Sarah Sanders? Is it Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Is it Cousin Huckabee? Is it Auntie Huckabee Sanders? Like, what's Uncle Tom but for white women who disappoint other white women? Oh, I know, Aunt Coulter.
So I want to make this clear because some people who are not comedians, people who are looking to politically grandstand, walked out of that because they were offended. That was silly to me. You invited this comedian there. You should have known what was happening. Now, we say all the time on the show, comedy, really, it should have no boundaries. It's still true for Wolf. Though, from a comedic standpoint, on the comedy scale, her bits ranked somewhere between Amy Schumer's I Feel Pretty and Lupus. The audience, obviously, if you watch it, was quiet and uncomfortable, though, to be fair, she had a tough act to follow with Harvey Weinstein and the Ficuses. That is not a musical act that you won't have to follow as a comedian. I've done some hell gigs. That would be amongst them.
That's tough.
But here's what I find so important about this. Is they bitched about this beforehand because all of a sudden the left really supported free speech, and they talked about Trump and how not showing up to this White House press correspondence dinner was unprecedented, and it was against the First Amendment. Because now we care about the First Amendment. And by the way, what was unprecedented was last year Samantha Bee had an anti-White House press correspondence dinner because she thought the White House press correspondence dinner was too pro-Trump. Right?
I forgot about that.
What's unprecedented is also the complete and total lack of respect for the office. And by the way, people have been really rough on presidents in the past, but there is some semblance of respect for an office. And this actually wasn't really about performing for the crowd. This was basically a gang initiation for Michelle Wolf and her fellow comedic buddies in Los Angeles and New York. No, I'm serious, and I'll talk about that later. By the way, hit the notification bell as we're talking about comedy because YouTube wants to see comedy die a slow, painful death, and notifications apparently subscriptions don't mean anything. Yeah, what were we going to say there, Gerald?
So if you're going to roast somebody, I'm asking you as a comedian, if you're going to roast somebody, don't you start in a little light and get them laughing along with you so that everybody's kind of playing along with it? Or do you just go full in?
Well, first off, it's not necessarily just supposed to be a roast. And that's actually a good question. Maybe the big difference here is because of Michelle Wolf's background. Typically speaking, you don't roast people you hate. Jeff Ross has talked about this. You know, we kind of roast Dean Cain. We might actually do a full episode. If you want to, comment below. We might do a full Thursday show where it's a roast of Dean Cain. We've talked about that and even bringing in some comedians to do it. To do it. But in this case, she's in there just railing on Sarah Huckabee Sanders and, of course, President Trump and Vice President Pence. And they might take it a different way because, you know, her history, she worked on Late Night with Seth Meyers for a while, and she did some shows with Comedy Central, joined The Daily Show with Trevor Noah as a writer, if you can believe it. He has an entire staff of writers. She's done benefits for Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics. Like, this is someone who is not just a comedian who happens to be liberal. This is someone who is an anti-Trump talking head on Trevor Noah's show. This is someone who is a leftist activist. So it's not like you're inviting somebody, for example, Johnny Carson was a known sort of Democrat, more liberal. But if you invited him to some kind of a roast or you invited him to a show, it wasn't like you were inviting someone who was more known for their volunteer work at Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, exactly.
You were bringing in Johnny Carson.
Funny.
Yeah, just to give you an idea as to how bought in she is to the left. I mean, what better way to display your biting comedic wit than breaking down into tears after Trump was elected, saying that everyone who voted for him was sexist? She did this on The Daily Show. Here, you don't believe me,
Michelle Wolf, everyone.
Just put a rubber band on your wrist and snap it to remind yourself.
Just be called Central.
Yes.
Just drop the comedy.
Comedy, yeah. She'd be called Central. And she'd probably say, I'm a centrist. Oh. So that's the reason why. It's a different spirit of comedy than it used to be. There used to be people who you'd see roast all the time, the Dean Martin roast, or you'd have people who were absolute monsters, just monsters of comedy, like Don Rickles, who, by the way, I don't even think a fan of Reagan and roasted Ronald Reagan as governor, so that you can look back and see some examples of comedians doing this in a way that entirely different spirit.
And the governor is the great politician of all time. He laughs at anything. My brother died.
Laughing his butt off.
I'm so fast I can turn out the lights in my bedroom, be in the bed before the room gets dark.
There is little I can say about this man that he has not already said himself.
You are a politician. Black, white, Jew, Gentile. We're all working for one cause. To figure out how you became governor.
I mean, these aren't complimentary bits, right?
No. But it works, and they love it.
Well, it works, and here's the big difference, too. Again, like I said, that she wasn't performing for the audience. She was performing for the Comedy Central writers' room, so she could walk off stage and go, did I do it, guys? Yeah. Did I steal the Gran Torino? Am I a part of the Writers Guild now? Because it wasn't funny. She was looking to piss off the audience. She was looking to be mean-spirited to Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Mike Pence. If you watch it, it's that some of them aren't even jokes. And here's the thing. This is why I think there's a huge difference. Let's remove the people who are politicians, people who aren't comedians, right? Walking out because they're offended. Those people piss me off on the right just as much as they do on the left. For everyone on a Facebook timeline, she shouldn't be allowed to do comedy. Of course she should. Let her be unfunny. Let the whole world see. Norm Macdonald is a great example. White House Correspondents' Dinner with Bill Clinton. Now, Norm Macdonald is a noted Christian conservative who got in trouble with the brass, right, at his network when he was at SNL for making fun of leftists, for making fun of Michael Jackson, for making fun of O.J. So he got in trouble all the time. And, by the way, did not like Bill Clinton. That's why he was disinvited from The View for insulting Bill Clinton. Here is him at the dinner.
But, it is rather daunting to me. I'm just a guy, What the hell am I? And here I am, I look out, I see President Bill Clinton, I see Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, broadcast legend Larry King, pornographer Larry Flint, Dick Morris. The list is starting to drop off a little, folks, but one thought crossed my mind, and that was, please, God, don't let me bomb in front of the president. And, of course, it was very inspiring to see President Clinton up here on crutches making a speech. I mean, he can't jog now, and he needs help getting around, and he still occasionally suffers great pain, On the upside, you got your medical marijuana, so that's, You must inhale, sir. It's the only way you're going to get better. But also, present this evening, Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State. Ms. Albright's been very busy. She just returned from Russia.
Even back then, Hillary Clinton was a humorless.
Applaud for her?
Witch.
Yeah, Madeleine Albright.
There were no blackbirds back then. What was she fiddling with? She was just disinterested, looking like she was scribbling on a napkin.
Yeah.
I don't know, like playing a record backwards.
McDonald.
So this is why I think Norm Macdonald is one of the few right-leaning comedians, and he did it, and he made it work. There was enough respect for the office, and it's sort of an unwritten rule. If you go to the White House correspondent, you go to this dinner, you go to this press dinner, you take some jabs, but it's not designed to draw blood. This is supposed to be an evening where the president should be able to enjoy themselves. That's why Donald Trump didn't go.
Did you hear her see her closing bit? She walks off stage and says, "And Flint still doesn't have clean water." That was what she stuck the landing with.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a punchline for those of you who don't know comedy. That's not.
Yeah,
at some point, you're not a comedian. You're just a heckler.
No, exactly. And here's a big difference. This is something I think is very important when people, why is the right? Well, here's why. Genuinely think about it. Let's take the right, the right in comedy, meaning everything to the right of Joe Rogan, okay? Yeah. And the left, meaning everything to the left of Joe Rogan. You cannot find a single right-wing comedian, right-leaning comic, libertarian comic, who has been outraged or started a march or been on a CNN quadrant view by jokes. You can't find an example of any of them. By the way, we've talked about this. I was invited to help write for the Gridiron Dinner. I said no. And the reason was I didn't think we could possibly be objective and do this show and write material for people directly in this administration. Maybe at some point I'd perform there if I were doing my own bits and people knew that I was not endorsing anybody. But we talked about this. We were like, I don't feel like we can be objective. I don't think it's right to do. These people endorse presidents. I know comedians who helped write speeches for Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. I know people who were punch-up writers for them. They're completely unashamed of it. Amy Schumer on the left gets outraged by jokes. Sarah Silverman gets outraged by jokes. Amy Schumer, great example, just recently said, well, I think people are afraid. They're just afraid of strong women. No, it's that you're not funny and that you then give fans crap who take a picture of you and upload it to Instagram. Sarah Silverman saying you shouldn't be able to say the word that's gay. Incorrect. They should be able to, particularly if it's funny. Find me an example of right-leaning comedians doing the same. You cannot find myself doing this, Owen Benjamin doing this, Nick DiPaolo doing this, again, Joe Rogan, even Bill Burr. Can you imagine those kinds of people, those comedians that they're perpetuating victim culture because it is a cottage industry on the left in comedy? Seth Meyers, Trevor Noah, this broad, Samantha Bee, Jimmy Kimmel, they go up and they cry and they demand that you give money to their political causes.
Plot twist, Chuck Schumer writes their material.
Yes, exactly. Plot twist. That's why I think the spirit of comedy has changed. And I talked about this for a while ago. I wrote it when I used to work with Andrew Breitbart. It was big Hollywood back then. You could probably search it in the archive. Search Steven Crowder, Tina Fey Doctrine. I wrote about this in 2009. Tina Fey was the first person on SNL who changed the way SNL was done. Yeah. She actually placed value on political influence over comedy. If you look at what they did with George W. Bush, and then you look what she did with Sarah Palin, she was one of the few people who invited politicians in, made them an integral part of the writing process, and said, okay, this is going to take priority over comedy. Before that, even if you go back to Chevy Chase's Gerald Ford impression, and he didn't like Gerald Ford at all, was pratfalls. Right? You go before that, you go back to Ronald Reagan, you go back to Jimmy Carter, their number one priority was comedy. The left today, because they are losing their stranglehold in academia, for the first time ever, more millennials, actually less than half, are supporting Democratic candidates. That's the first time that's ever happened. 46%, according to the recent Reuters Ipsos poll. They are losing their stranglehold, and so they are ramping up this activism. I'm not outraged at all by what she did. I think if you invite Michelle Wolf to this dinner, you should know who she is. A far-left activist who wept on air because it's hysterical when Donald Trump won, at least to us. I can't imagine going on a show, doing a bit, and just crying. Like, if you separate it and say, okay, this is a separate thing. This is me giving an interview where I'm being earnest. Right. But this was a comedy package she was putting together for Trevor Noah. They're stepping up, ramping up their activism, and the left in comedy are the ones perpetuating the victim culture. So the reason people get touchy and people become this war zone is that was not a woman out there performing for that audience. A lot of you are wondering, like, why am I so off-put by this? Usually I'm able to laugh I laugh the most at the good George Bush jokes when he was president. I thought they were hysterical. But if you feel put off by this, and I do, I'm not offended, but I find it harder and harder to watch. It's because it's not designed for you to watch. This entire performance was a performance designed for the writer's room at Trevor Noah, or maybe an audition for Jimmy Kimmel. She walked off that stage, and like you said, Not Gay Jared, by the way, Flint doesn't have clean water. Let me ask you this. Do you think she walked off going, Flint doesn't have clean water? That's one hell of a tag. I'm going to leave him in stitches. Or do you think she walked off and said, Flint doesn't have clean tap water? Did I do good, guys? Did I do good? Am I one of you now? How many more of them do I have to hurt? That's the problem. And that's not what comedy is supposed to be. It's unfunny. It sucks. Michelle Wolf, you suck. Amy Schumer used to be funny. And the further left she goes, the more she sucks. And we're at the point where I wouldn't join these people at a barbecue. Hey, if you like this video, subscribe or click the notification bell. You should do both anyways because YouTube doesn't notify you if you're just subscribed. You have to hit that notification bell. So if you already are subscribed, hit the notification bell. And if you're not supporting this content, go to louderwithcrowder.com/mugclub. You get the full nightly show, an hour, every day, free when you subscribe. This Handats Girthy mug, as well as other programming. And listen, you also get to support Not Gay Jared's Remicade treatment. I don't know what it is. I know it has something because he had ulcerative colitis. It doesn't anymore, thank God, because I removed his colon. And truth be told, it's not working very well anyway.